I'm going to give just a brief moment and allow some people to come on. In the meantime, I imagine I will go ahead and let you guys know that Revival Church is going to be reopening this Sunday. As far as the in location facility, we've been following the government recommendations as well as the executive orders to social distance. And we have been very compliant and respectful of our leadership's wishes. We are excited to see, obviously, some corruption be exposed. But meanwhile, we did our part and are excited to see things begin to reopen. Now, we're going to be reopening Revival Church with some parameters in place where we're going to ask everybody to be considerate of one another and use specific personal environment containment measures. We're going to be sanitizing our hands. People are able to do whatever they need to do as far as wear masks or gloves or whatever they desire to wear. That's going to be a personal situation. But let me go ahead and turn off my screensaver here real quick so that I don't have any problems with what I just experienced. All right. So, so I wanted to get on here, guys, and I wanted to talk about the situation with the farmers dumping the milk as well as the potatoes and different things that we have seen as far as articles circulating. And give me 1 second. Let me see. So it's another spin, or I should say it's another situation with some facts that surround it that has caused some people to put a spin on it that is actually just untrue. And so I wanted to kind of talk about that today briefly to kind of give you an idea as to how things can be continue to be perpetuated as some sort of conspiracy theory that's not actually, when you begin to break down the facts. So I've seen people circulating the posts, videos of farmers talking about, getting dumping potatoes and milk. And I've seen multiple people say that it was the government that was making them do this. And, they would hashtag what's really going on and, all these different things to kind of imply that, the government was forcing people to dump. The government's not forcing people to dump crops. What's actually happening is, farmers aren't able to move their product. And so what does any business do right now with a stock of perishable inventory? Well, unfortunately, in many cases, it's going to perish. And so with the schools being closed, with the restaurants, being closed, take into account all the children that each school would feed. They would, order these products. And so then you ask, well, why aren't they giving it away? Well, because there's no supply distribution, in place. There's no outlet for these farmers. It's easier for them to dump it than to go out and begin to try to set up shop, and all these different things. And so, it's just one of those things, and it's unfortunate, but if anything needs to be remedied, if anything needs to be altered, if anything needs to be changed, then it is, from a government level, we would need to maybe look at this thing as, like, let's say you're in leadership in our government. You would need to look at this thing and be like, all right, so, we didn't expect this thing to happen, but now that it's happening and it's beginning to reveal all of the different. And I was on the phone with somebody today, and I was talking to them about it, and I was giving them an illustration of a solution, a possible solution. And my solution would have been something like, anybody who's out of a job right now, go and apply with your local farmer, and we're going to pay for them to hire you and to use you to distribute their crops, so that into, different channels, or maybe they could set up a food distribution, facility in a local area. Maybe they could partner with an organization that's in, many different towns, like Walmart's or something like that. And they could set up like some sort of distribution center. I would probably look for a company that's, probably out of business right now. But nonetheless, I even saw one particular person post this on Facebook. And what ended up happening was they said, look at what the government's doing. And I thought that was actually something on my shirt, but it's just sunlight coming through the blinds. So, they said, look at what the government's doing. They're making people throw out their crops, right? And as if like, what's really going on, And so, I said, I just posed the question. I'm like, why do you think it's the government? Like, how do you know they're not just throwing it out because they have no place to sell it because everything's closed down? And, they were like, well, I mean, I just assume, I guess. And so the problem is, this is how this stuff's circulating. So what ended up happening is there was a lady that goes to our church that, ended up commenting and said, actually, I'm going to a dairy farm. And on this post, it was dairy that they were pouring out, milk coming out of the back of the truck, just unloading it. And of course, they were saying, what's really going on? The government is forcing them. Well, it's, so this lady says, I'm going there tomorrow to go pick up some milk. She says, I'll actually ask them what's really going on. And so the owner of the dairy farm told her, she said, the production facilities that make the cheeses and different things like that are out of business. They can't do it themselves. I'm trying to doing this from recollection, so I may have a little bit. But then she said the schools are closed, so they normally distribute it to schools to feed the kids lunches. They can't send it to there. And they really, they've already given some away to the local food banks, but they've exhausted every possible channel to even give it away. Unless, of course, they drove from house to house and said, here's a potato for you, here's a potato, or whatever. And of course, these companies, they're already losing profits. And so they don't have the ability to do that type of a thing economically on a personal level. And so it's just very important, guys, to understand that some of these things, and here I am again, coming on my YouTube channel and probably going to get a lot of flack for it because I decide to share an opposing viewpoint. But you know what? I share these opposing viewpoints because I want people to be critical thinkers. I even did the video on critical thinking. And I want people to be critical thinkers. And I want people to not just take everything at face value. We've got a lot of people playing, armchair quarterbacks. You know what I mean? I actually saw that on an episode of one of my favorite shows today with my wife while we were taking and having some lunch. And armchair quarterbacks, and they're just like sitting on their lazy boy watching TV, trying to tell everybody how to do it, right? Well, that can happen on YouTube as well. And so, I'm just trying to get people to realize that things aren't always as they seem, and be careful how you receive somebody's perpetuated implication on their Facebook page or, YouTube channel or what have you. A lot of the things that people are saying about certain things, now these conspiracy theories, they're based on guilt by association, and then also people's perspectives. It's not necessarily based on any really hardcore evidence. And so when you begin to peel back the layers, you begin to see that things are not as they have been perpetuated to be. And so these farmers that are dumping potatoes, farmers that are dumping milk, no, the government's not forcing them to do it. What's actually happening is they've got no place to sell it. And then they've given some away to the food banks if they decide to, as the farm owner, because that's their decision. And then what they can't give away, they're dumping because they have no place to outsource it. We're talking about perishable goods here. And so, can we change some things? Yes. But people are perpetuating these videos in a way to promote their position of rebellion against the government's decision to close down things. And, to be quite honest with you, it was not an easy decision for the government to close down anything. It wasn't an easy decision for them to do any of the stuff that they've done. Now, granted, I'm not talking about any of the corruption that actually does exist in certain places. What I'm talking about is when this virus came out, it was, nobody knew much at all about it. In fact, we're still apparently learning to this date. And so it's just wisdom a lot of times to kind of put everything on hold until you have a chance to evaluate the behavior of this plague. And so that's what we've done. We've taken a time out socially, economically, a lot of different ways. And we've taken a time out and we've given this thing an opportunity to demonstrate its behavior. And so I think even just for that alone, it was wise. Folks, I've shared so many stories of people that I know personally that have lost loved ones to this virus. In fact, there was a young lady that I ministered to years ago at the very beginning of my ministry in California who took care of her 2 Down syndrome adult brothers. She was very overwhelmed and overburdened because there was a lot on her plate before they ended up moving these gentlemen into a place where they could be cared for. Well, in that place, one of her brothers caught the coronavirus and it ended up killing him. And she was sharing videos on her Facebook about her brother, whom she loved very much. And when I ministered to her, when she was going through that tough time where she had a lot on her plate, that caused me to have that heart connection, not only to her, but I felt the love for her brother that she had. So when I saw this post about him dying, it caused me to weep. And we're talking about people's loved ones here, and this is a very real thing. And, I remember back in the day when this whole coronavirus thing started, and I was on Facebook saying, guys, just chill out and just be okay. It's unpredictable. Nobody knows anything about this right now. And everybody's like, why is everybody freaking out? Does anybody know anybody with coronavirus? And I'm like, that's not the point. They're trying to stop it before people do. Well, now you don't have to look far to see somebody that has lost somebody that they know. On our last Tuesday prayer call, or the one before that, I, asked how everybody was doing. We had one gentleman who had tested positive last week, or he had a 104 fever. He's in Jersey or New York, one of the hot spots, or he was in New York City, and he had spiked a 104 degree fever, and he's like, my whole family has been fighting this virus, and now my grandpa has it, and he's like, I just really need prayer for my grandpa. He's old, and I don't want to lose him. These are very real things. And it's like, I get there's a lot of things that are being affected. This is not easy for anybody. But, potato farming, right? Dairy farming is very important. But when you compare a loss of a truck full of potatoes to a loss of a life, do the math. To me, get rid of the potatoes. And so, yes, it sucks for the farmer. And, but maybe there's some things that the government can do in a situation like this. If this ever happens again, praise God, we're opening back up, and that's awesome. And we know that even according to the prophets, folks, if you've been watching, if you even trust in prophets and you know any of today's modern day prophets, then you'll have heard that the resounding word through the mouth of multiple prophetic witnesses is that this thing is going to be ending at summertime or around summertime or by summertime. It's always basically summertime is the cut off prophetic word. And so we have 1 month before we hit summer. Actually, I'd like to know if when does summer start?
Saturday, June 20th.
June 20th.
Tuesday,
All right.
September.
So June 20th. In Florida, we recognize summer as June 1st, but officially June 20th. So we got, 50 days. All right. 50 days, a month and a half, roughly, before prophetically this thing is completely done. And so we have good news. And if you trust in God's prophets, folks, then you'll know that we have good news. I trusted in God's prophets. I invested in the stock market for the first time in my life. And I'm excited to share the testimony. And I'm really excited to share the testimony, especially to the people who say that these prophets are false prophets. Because the good news is everybody that is offered tomorrow, or at least the next few months, will be here during that time. And we'll all get to see whether it was accurate or inaccurate of a prophetic word. And so what I did is I knew, according to God's messengers, that this was going to be over soon. Now, the world itself had no idea. They didn't know. They're trusting in vaccines and all these different things. And I get it. People, I believe God even inspires medicine. Hello. We've talked about this numerous times. I do believe that also the enemy can corrupt medicine. So there's balance there. But I invested in the stock market and in some things that specifically crashed when this pandemic came out and the government was basically put on a lockdown. I watched everything that came down hard. And in my spirit, I'm like, I know that this is going to be over soon. The world has no idea what's going on. Now, granted, I know it's going to be over, but there's still this interim process that we're all within, right? Like there's then and there's now and there's that process in between. Just because you have a prophetic word that it's going to be over doesn't mean you don't take necessary precautions now. So we did that. And, I believe that, let's just say, right, figuratively speaking, now I believe it's completely concrete, but let's say you don't know what to think about those prophetic words or voices. Well, let's just say figuratively they are correct, right? Would you agree that if this thing is going to end by summertime, and God knew that, and he actually called the quarantine, watch this, do you think that maybe it could be possible that God actually did that because there were lives saved, knowing that it was only going to be around for a few months? And if we put, society on in timeout, do you think that potentially lives could have been saved? I do. I absolutely do. And so if we come to the place, now everybody, when you put a kid in timeout, they can kick and scream and complain and whine and cry and all these different things. We've been seeing that in our country, folks. We've been seeing people that have been put in timeout and they've been kicking, screaming, whining, complaining, griping, telling the parent they're doing it wrong, all these different things. But here's the thing. What if the reality is that there were actually lives spared? I believe that to be true, guys. I believe that to be true. If this virus was even demonically manipulated or altered to even have been released by evil assignments, then guess what? Even the quarantine could have been literally God's saving grace for many, many more people that potentially could have died. But all that to say this, I've already noticed a 40%, haven't even looked at it today, 40%. These industries aren't even going yet. But just on the fact that the government's getting ready to reopen, they've already gone up 40% from my initial investment, my initial buy-in. And so, you know, it's my first time playing the stock market. I would probably not normally have picked a stock market to invest in, just because I don't even know where to start. But I thought to myself, you know, if God's prophets, right, are saying that it's going to be over by the summertime, and if these industries are hit right now and they're down some, you know, what would it have been, a third of what their stock value was right beforehand, I could literally double or triple my money in a year's time. And so now, granted, there's other variables at play, right? We don't know where the organization's health was when they got hit economically. So obviously things can happen. They could file bankruptcy, all these different things. That probably wouldn't be a good turnout. But I decided, you know what? I have a much better option on this situation because I have some insider information, right? Insider trading. Yeah. What are they going to get me for? You know, hearing from the Lord. But anyway, so, or trusting in God's prophets. All right. So anyway, it's funny, but, so, you know, I'm pretty excited and I'm excited for the testimony to come around, because when that happens, it'll be a really good teaching point on how prophecy can be so valuable in, you know, even, well, at any time, but sometimes in the most challenging times, especially because when everybody's saying so much and there's information overload, which is exactly what's happening right now. And this is why I've been doing these videos, because I believe the spirit of fear has been able to capitalize on a lot of people's hearts in a lot of ways, because they're relying on information versus revelation. We have a hope, we have a promise, we have even word from the Lord, multiple, as long as you believe in the prophetic. And so if you trust the proven, the tested, the tried, the authenticated prophets of our day, and I'm not talking about based on people's opinions, I'm talking about the accuracy of their words. And you're not going to just see that on one word, because that's the problem, is that people always judge through the lens of their heart rather than through the lens of, I mean, there's a number of different things that affect that. But when you are patient and discerning, you know, sometimes discernment takes some time. And if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of people who have discerned very incorrectly. And, well, it's a whole different video, to be quite honest with you. And I won't even go any further into that, just because I can see how that can easily open up into some things. But, again, good news. We are opening up Revival Church on Sundays. You know, our church is still under 2 years old. And so, you know, we're still growing. And so it's going to be easier for us than, let's say, a more well-established church who's been around for a decade or several. And so, you know, we'll be able to use the recommendations, the parameters that they have set forth. In Florida, we're actually an essential business. We're listed, according to our governor, as an essential you know, organization or what have you. So that's good news, you know, which really means that we never actually had to close once that statement was officially declared. Before that, you had a pastor that was actually arrested for not closing, if you remember the Rodney Howard Brown video we did. But it was like a week later, our governor came out. Now that was at a county level that happened. And so that was based upon the local jurisdiction of the county. And then when our governor released the essential, well, that became statewide. So now we have been since then officially able to reopen. But we decided, for the safety of the people, we wanted to keep, the social distancing in place to give this thing more time to really study the behavior of this virus. And, we feel better, and especially how our area is being affected. I think that makes a big deal to do with how, because obviously churches in New York City, it would probably not be a good idea, right, to open back up right now, at least. They're still being severely affected. But as far as our area, in fact, I can tell you right now, to date in our county, we've had 44 people die from the coronavirus. So in our county, in the state, we've had 1,314 people. Now, granted, that's more than zero, and that's not to be taken lightly. But it's so we've left it up to the people. We've left it up to the people to make the decision for their family whether they want to expose themselves to corporate gatherings at this point. So we feel that even at the level that we're currently functioning, we have the room to be spread out enough in our sanctuary. We have the proper disinfecting procedures, so we're excited to be able to do that. So anyway, potatoes and milk. If you weren't able to hear the beginning of the stream, I encourage you to go back and listen. It has to do with the way that people are perpetuating. There's one other point that I want to point out too. I watched this one cowboy video. You might have seen it too. It's pretty viral. This cowboy, basically citing some of these things. The potatoes, getting dumped out. The dairy, dumping all their milk. We talked about why that's happening. And it's not necessarily because the government's forcing them to dump it like people are saying. It's the fact that there's no place to distribute it. We talked about that earlier in the video, and I elaborated more on that. So if you want to hear, go ahead. And I even have a personal testimony of somebody who authenticated that from our ministry, because they were going to the dairy farm the very next day. And they did, and they authenticated what I'm sharing with you. So straight from the owner of the farm. And now here's the thing, folks. We take people's personal opinions, these doctors, farmers in these positions, and we circulate these videos to basically support whatever our position is, as long as they're sharing in their video a position that agrees with ours. But the problem is a lot of this stuff is emotionally charged. A lot of this stuff is emotionally, and I was telling a buddy of mine today on the phone, actually one of our ministers, that, ministering from a place of pain is never a good place to minister from. And so, yes, when you're being affected, just shouting your pain doesn't accomplish anything except just vent and rant, which we can all do. Great, right? But ministering from a place of like, all right, let's strategize and see how we can actually remedy this, because pain will completely mask the entire equation or the big picture. And it can make you literally throw the baby out with the bathwater. For example, in relative terms, we can use the situation, for example, whereas the government has shut down to protect the health and lives of people. You hear me earlier in the video talk about the people that I personally know that have personally lost loved ones in their family. Multiple stories that I shared, multiple. And, or personally being affected by this thing in a very real way. So the reality is that we're doing this for the bigger picture, right? That they came together and made the decision. Now, again, this does not equate or include the corruption that some of us already know about, depending upon what we know about it. that might differ, but I'm going with what the prophets are saying and what the prophets are seeing by the eyes of the Holy Ghost, not necessarily what people are trying to do in connecting dots based on information. That the information realm is fallible. Doesn't mean that it can't be useful. It just means, especially with where people are going with it nowadays. But the reality is that, when you're affected and you're personally affected, let's say you're a farmer or, what have you, and you're, really struggling and you're like, my whole business and I'm just mad at the government because of my personal situation. Well, I mean, to be fair, you actually can be manifesting selfishness, because we talked about this earlier. It's like, you equate a truck full of potatoes to a dead person. Like, which one is more expendable? You know what I mean? Like, I'll take the loss of a truckload of potatoes before I'll ever take the loss of a life. And so that's kind of where we're at here. But a lot of people aren't seeing that. They're only seeing their pain. Like, I am sitting on my couch in my house, having to be stuck in my house, and I just want to rant because of me. And anybody else out there that will partner with my selfish message, and again, it's a very real thing. But when you compare it, again, like with what I'm talking about, what the bigger picture is, at the end of the day, we just need to, do your mom ever tell you that, zip your lip, and we talked about this. We've got, a bunch of kids that have been forced to go into timeout, and they're doing what kids do, and they're kicking and screaming and telling, mom, they just don't understand. And, all these different things that kids can do when they just don't like the circumstances that they've been handed. And so we're coming at this from a place where a lot of people are, very emotional, and for a number of reasons, obviously, some very real reasons, because nobody's economic downturn is anything either to take lightly, unless you're comparing it to somebody's life. So, because economies can come back, unless you are manifesting the anointing to resurrect people from the dead, then that's pretty much, So, the point is that we need to understand that a lot of these people are ministering from a place of pain. You just want to be careful to not recirculate some of this stuff, because you're just getting people, you're creating a mutiny, you're creating a rebellious, attitude towards the people who are really working and making some very hard decisions to protect our country, to protect our people, and they're considering our family members. And, now granted, some other people had some other motives, and that's completely something that we're praying about, right? But I believe that there are some people in position in our government, like President Trump, who are concerned about doing the right thing and protecting the lives of the American people. And for that, I can stand with, and I can partner with, and I can appreciate and say, we're doing a wonderful thing. Now, that's from this level up here, from the governmental level, right? Well, let's take it down a couple notches and say how that affects these people down here. Well, they've been doing some things to remedy some of those things, like some stimulus checks and different things like this. But what are some other ways that we could remedy this situation as well? Let's strategize. Like, let's say if we ever have to do this again, whether we get into any sort of, biological warfare, which potentially this could actually be. And so let's just say we get into another case of any biological warfare at any given time, and they have to basically put the country. We probably should learn from this and create systems to protect the farmers, right? Create systems. And we talked about this earlier about how you can, maybe make a statement and say, if you're at a loss of job or you've been laid off during this time, if you'd like to work, there's opportunities for you in a distribution chain where we're creating or calling upon local agencies that we will support financially to come alongside the farmers and take their crops that they're throwing away and then distributing it to households and families. Because, hey, wouldn't that also save our government some money on the other end of things where they're feeling like if they just write everybody a check, right? Maybe they could take a little bit out of that check, everybody's check, and put it towards these functions and these distribution things where we can help the farmers. See, there's ways to do this if we aren't acting from an emotionally charged position. There's ways to think about these things where we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We can comply with the government. We can, and maybe just do things in a different way where it doesn't have to be, everybody against, tit for tat, back and forth, warring against each other. Let's just come together, strategize, and, prayerfully and non-emotionally come at this thing where we're looking at it from a different standpoint, right? So anyway, I wanted to get on here and share these thoughts with you guys. And it's to be quite honest with you, from a deliverance standpoint, how this all works is there's actually demons. We've talked about this. The spirit of Jezebel causes people to be emotionally charged in a way where they look at things through the lens of their emotion and how it affected them, rather than stopping to take a breath and see, what we might need to do here to accommodate your need, my need, his need, her need, and really create a network. I would love to see our country come together in a way where we maybe do some things differently. We've gotten ugly, folks. If you guys have gotten on Facebook or some of these social media platforms, we've gotten pretty ugly in the way that we are manifesting during a time of great difficulty. I want to see us come to a place where we join and lock arms, and we are actually the church that we are supposed to be, and say, how can we help out during these times? I was on our weekly prayer call today with our ministry, and I was describing how, I want to get to the place where we are more equipped financially, as well as, with, more hands on deck, where we have a bigger outfit, where we can be more of a representative of Christ during this time, where we could maybe, supply food, distribution for some people that are in this time that are really in a time of need, where maybe they can, save their food expenses, by coming to us, where we have a distribution facility where they can maybe apply those funds maybe to their bills right now that they are having a hard time trying to figure out which one they can pay, and different things like that. So, that's my hope. That's my dream. That's my heart. And that's really one of the reasons why I've been coming on here and sharing a lot of these different perspectives to really kind of talk about, how people are taking and recirculating and perpetuating rants and messages that are really just a bunch of emotion that really don't have the bigger picture in mind. And so, it's hard for a lot of people, and we've talked about this. I just did this in a recent video, but it's hard for anybody that's being affected by this situation. But some people it's much harder than others, and I would say the people it's hardest for is the family. This coronavirus death that I was talking about earlier in the video. This lady says, I couldn't even get to be with my brother because they're like, people don't understand what it's like when in the reality of the trenches of this coronavirus thing. And it's like, she's like, I couldn't even see my brother before he passed. I couldn't even be with him to say goodbye. None of that stuff was available because they don't allow family members to come in to be with the victims of this coronavirus. And it was just so sad, so sad. And, this is the reality, folks, that we're dealing with. And I just wish that, instead of people bucking the system because they just think it's a conspiracy because farmers are dumping potatoes. I wish people would get everybody get on the same page and be working in unity to be like, man, how can I help out? How can I be a part of the remedy of this type of a situation? Where can I serve? Where can I love? Where can I, yeah. So anyway, support. Where can I support, and be a support to the people who are out there really hurting. And anyway, this will all be over soon, folks. We know that prophetically. I'm very excited for that to come around. Just wanted to get on here and share this video. I bless you all. Love my prayer partners, supporters, and really. Oh, our let me throw this out here, guys. Where did it go? There it is. Our weekly deliverance service. If you guys don't know this, we broke up into breakout sessions this past Tuesday, and the feedback that I got was absolutely dynamic. We're going to continue doing that on every single one of these weekly deliverance calls. We're going to break it up. We've got several ministers. It's been more effective instead of me ministering to 100 and some odd people on one call, where I'm trying to see who's doing what, and they get lost in this, like, what's that TV show where all the pictures, anyway, I can't even remember. I almost wanted to think of it because I felt like it was just right there, but it's not. But anyway, I feel like it was way more effective to have our different ministers represent a much smaller number of people, where it was much more personal. People were able to get much more focused ministry, which can be very, very much effective. A lot of deliverance requires a more focused approach, and we're excited to be able to provide that, especially with the way we've transitioned this on this call. So we're going to be doing these online deliverance services even when we pick back up at our weekly services. We are not doing our weekly deliverance services in person on location yet, just the church on Sundays. The reason for that is because we still have people vomiting into buckets, coughing and hacking and all these different things. And until we're coming out the tail end of this coronavirus thing, that's just not a contained environment. So we want to make sure that we have a contained environment that's safe for people to come to be able to gather socially, using the right. So again, sign up for our Tuesday night call for deliverance, and you'll have an opportunity to be in one of the rooms where one of our ministers will have a more direct approach to be able to minister to you. And I'll have one of the rooms. But we allow Zoom to select automatically who gets in which room. So it's kind of like the Lord picks, you know what I mean? So even with that, it can really be a really dynamic experience when you're, obviously in the will of the Lord. So, all right, we'll see you guys on the next broadcast. Bless you all. And if you are interested in helping support the ministry, that's the link. Just go to the giving page, johngeorgeministries.com/give. We appreciate everybody's support, and looking forward to getting out of this coronavirus lockdown soon enough. But we are supportive of the decision that our government is making to begin to ease this thing out and roll it out. And I'm excited because one of the businesses that I've been missing is reopening in 2 days. And so I am extremely excited about that. So bless you guys. Talk to you soon.